Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Welcome everyone to an exciting episode of Geek Homeworld.
Woohoo!
This weekend, Cheryl and I joined millions of others for the premiere of Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. And we are going to tell you all about it. But, this is our spoiler-free review, so you can still listen even if you haven't seen the movie yet.
Even if we have to bleep out half of what Ed says because he can't not spoil.
That's true. Yeah.
I've thoroughly reviewed his notes, so...
Yeah. I had to make notes. And
I've redacted much.
Yes, you have, because I'm like, that important scene that's like that scene.
Stop before you do it.
I know.
You just can't help yourself.
I can't help myself.
He will help himself.
But I will. Do good. I'm going to start off with the biggest bombshell of anything. My just first thought about this film. And if I have to make one massive statement concerning DC films, I will say this. Dawn of Justice is now my second all-time favorite DC movie. And it could possibly be my favorite. My all-time favorite, obviously, is The Dark Knight. And that, for me, is monumental praise for Batman vs. Superman. Dawn of Justice.
Well, I have to say, I'm not a Dark Knight fan. I don't like any of the Dark Knight movies.
Ooh.
And I wasn't a big fan of Man of Steel. But
yes,
this movie I liked. I liked this movie definitely better than I liked any of those movies.
Yes.
I thought it was much better. And even though it's 30 minutes longer than Man of Steel, it doesn't feel as long as Man of Steel felt. I mean, the pacing is much better.
The story is much more solid. I would say Dawn of Justice was superbly acted just by everyone. And anybody who doubted Batfleck, I don't think you should doubt
Not us. We didn't doubt Batfleck. We always had great confidence in...
Well, I had moments of weakness.
Watch out for that lightning.
Yeah, there's a little bit of lightning. That lightning will get you. But it was just also gorgeously filmed. The cinematography was very real, and it felt very much like we were in...
Oh, it was gorgeous. I mean, not just well shot, but I mean, here's the thing. And, I'm also not a big fan of 3D.
Right.
But I really felt like the 3D in this was very good. And, and I'm not talking about necessarily things flying out of the screen at you or anything like that, but, it's just the atmosphere of it. It was actually beautiful. The 3D added to the beauty of this film, and there's no doubt that this film is beautiful.
Yeah, and we did not get to see it in IMAX 3D, which a friend of ours did, and he said he thought it was awesome in the IMAX 3D. I'd have to also say that the story was just very solid. For me, it was very riveting. I was very engaged in what was happening with all the characters. And for once, I didn't say, oh, there goes Lois Lane getting into trouble again. Even though there
Well, I did like Lois a lot better in this film, too.
I liked Lois better, too. Yes. And I just, she always gets... Lois Lane just has that knack of getting into trouble, and Superman's got to save her. He's like her insurance company,
So we're done with the old Lois from the 1980s, but I thought actually that the best performances were by Jeremy Irons as Alfred. Mm-hmm. And then also by Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. And, I had talked about, if you listened to our podcast previously, I talked about the fact that I was very excited to see what Jesse Eisenberg was going to do with this role.
Definitely a different Lex Luthor than we've seen on screen.
Yeah, he's not Gene Hackman. He's not Kevin Spacey. In fact, I kind of feel like he's the son of one of them. Like, that's why his character's so twisted. He talks about his dad,
Martin Luther.
Yeah, I mean...
He doesn't call him by name.
No, he doesn't call him by name. He just talks about it. He references his dad a couple of times. And that kind of made me think maybe it is. But I have to say, I still don't... Even though I think he's brilliant and I think the part is well written for the most part, I don't understand what his motivation is. That's, I think there are little things that you can pick out with this movie. Mm-hmm. And that for me is one of them. I get it.
Well, it's jealousy for one. He wants to be the ultimate...
Well, all bad guys do, but it's still but why? Why is he doing the things that he's doing? So, but I thought, he was brilliant, and like one of our listeners was saying that he felt like this villain was more like a Batman villain than a Superman villain, even though Lex Luthor is traditionally
he
Superman.
Felt more like the Joker.
Yeah,
from Dark Knight. And
just as I expected, it reminded me of the villains from Gotham. Not that I've watched very much Gotham, but that sort of real kind of origin, but not somebody who turns villainous in the midlife,
right?
And that's kind of like we're seeing Superman, we're seeing Batman at different stages in their lives, and this is interesting to me. Ben Affleck, and by the way, Amy Adams, who plays Lois Lane, are about a decade older than Henry Cavill, who plays Superman, and Henry Cavill is the same age, almost exactly, just a few months apart, as Jesse Eisenberg. But Eisenberg's character seems younger. I think that there's so much gravitas behind Henry's Superman and Clark Kent and Jesse Eisenberg. I mean, Jesse Eisenberg has one of those I'm going to always look like a boy faces. Maybe he's going to be 50 years old, like Dick Clark and Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, he's
But you feel like he's at the beginning, and even though we know Superman,
he's kind of Tobey Maguire in his looks. He's always going to look young like that.
It's somehow he's gotten super evil, but he's still kind of at the beginning, and Superman is at the beginning, still trying to figure things out. But Batman has clearly been through it, and this man needs some serious group therapy, 12-step he
needs some chill pills, something.
Alfred is doing his best to try to hold him down, but
try to be his good conscience.
But as a tall order, he's definitely, and that's why I kind of wonder: was it intended that this continuity follows the Dark Knight series?
Not necessarily.
Because it kind of feels like this Batman has gone through he's what Christian Bale's Batman went through. Like, he's survived that.
I think they're trying to loosely say that, without directly saying it. Though there are parts of this movie that made me think were homages to The Dark Knight. Right. There's a chase scene that is eerily familiar. And I can't say anymore.
Careful there.
Careful. I know I'm skating on thin ice there.
Yeah.
But I when I left this film, I just felt emotionally exhausted, and I really can't say much more than that because this is a spoiler-free episode, and later on I will explain more on a future episode that's full of spoilers. But there are so many Easter eggs, and there's so many things in this movie, but the emotion of this movie was just really cranked up.
Well, there's more genuine. One of the things that I didn't like about Man of Steel was I thought it was just too brooding, and so while this film...
Well, a lot of people complain Superman shouldn't be so brutish, but...
Right, and it's brooding. Definitely... Well, this film is dark. I didn't feel that it was heavy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
I think Batman was way over the top.
Well, I mean, psychologically, yes, but then at this point, in the storyline,
it made sense.
Yeah,
why he did with it. You do understand what his motives are.
I didn't actually. Yeah, exactly. You totally got his motives. I didn't understand. I wasn't troubled by the darkness in this, and the way that I'm troubled by some of the DC television programs, and the way that I'm troubled by Dark Knight. I mean, I do prefer, as much as I liked this film, I will say that I still prefer the Marvel franchise. I think DC still has a long way to go to equal just the brilliance of what's going on. It's a totally different feel.
It is a totally different feel.
You know,
but DC's apparently going to go the dark route. They've started the dark route. They're going to... I mean, The Dark Knight changed everything.
Yeah. But I don't... You know, it's interesting. Of course, we know that this is a setup for the films to come with the Wonder Woman and Aquaman
and Dawn of Justice.
Dawn of Justice coming up in the next few years. And so, in some ways...
Justice League.
Justice League, yeah. In some ways, this film had a lot of burdens on it. It had a lot of things it needed to accomplish.
They're trying to go 0 to 60 with one movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Unlike, with Marvel, they started with the characters and showed each of them and then brought them together. This is like, hey, let's bring them all together and try to figure out why they're all together.
Right.
And so and that's another one of the parts of this I feel like that's a little thin, the reason that they're all coming together.
Well, the reason they're coming is a spoiler, but
right.
It's handed out heavily towards the end of the movie, and there's a sequence or two where I totally picked up on.
And we still, but even though, I mean, I still don't know why. I still don't understand why. I understand what's happening. I don't understand in that case why. Like with Batman, I know what's happening. I know why it's happening. The rest of it, I don't know why things are happening at all.
Why there's a doomsday.
So there's a lot of stuff that can still come in for sure.
Well, during the fight with Doomsday, it was over the top awesome. There were just some total dropping moments.
Yeah. Well, and I think though the visual effects throughout the film and in that are really stunning, but in that particular part of the film, there are moments where you get, like back in the days where you could see the strings. It's kind of like, there's enough of a slip there in some of the visual effects for me in the animation that you're taken out of the film and you're recognizing this isn't real.
That was very, like, the first shot or so of Doomsday was a little weak visually when he was... the fight was really getting underway. I'm really trying to dance around spoilers.
And it's really surprising to me
But that passed. For me, and overall, I think it was visually stunning.
Well, and it sort of came in and out for me. And we watched the whole credits, even though the usher was trying to kick us out. He kept saying, "There's nothing after the credits." And we're like, we don't care. We're watching the credits,
I love that the Batmobile had its own PR agent.
Yeah. Well, and there was, we wanted to see all the places that it filmed and all that. Places. But also, there are just literally hundreds of visual effects artists working on this film.
Yes, it's
the budget that they had was $250 million, quarter of $1 billion on this film. It all went into the visual effects. It clearly did not go into wardrobe because they obviously did not have enough fabric to complete an entire dress for Wonder Woman. I mean, she barely had her bits covered. No matter what she was wearing.
Thank the maker on that one.
I was like, they could have had a few less jackets.
But just like Wonder Woman's, and I know it's all darker and grittier, and I miss the days of the brighter costumes, and that makes me think about the overall feel of the movie was, for me, darker and grittier, and it made me think of Superman, and I think of the quintessential Superman being Christopher Reeve, but that was back in the 80s, and Superman, and some of the hits that Man of Steel took, and even now is the fact that, and people are getting more used to it, but is the fact that Superman's always bright and optimistic, and we see a darker, grittier Superman, and I think later on Superman does become that brighter light, but right now these are still like his beginnings with Man of Steel and going forward in time to Dawn of Justice. So
well, and it continues that storyline from Man of Steel where we're not quite sure whether Superman's a good thing or a bad thing, and he's not quite sure what he's supposed to do, and he's
just trying to help people.
Jonathan Kent has told him don't do anything, and
Martha's like, be their savior, be their icon, their hero.
Or be nothing.
You don't owe him a thing. You never did, and that he looks a little confused, but he's like, yeah, you're right. But
in Man of Steel, for me, it was just so consistently depressing, and but this film, despite the fact that it was dark, had these moments that were more Marvel-esque, I'll say, where there's this humor. There's a lot of humor to Alfred's character.
Yeah.
There's some humor to Jesse Eisenberg's portrayal, although it's psychologically, challenging. But then there are also these moments of actual genuine, like this could be a movie that wasn't a superhero movie, where you see like
affection.
What's going on with Holly Hunter, and then you have the moments of affection
with Lois
and Clark,
which were nice.
And I said paced, that was paced well.
It was paced well.
And Perry White also.
And I said with the Man of Steel before, I said the fact that I did enjoy. There were more Lois and Clark moments, and I really wanted that.
Yeah. Well, and Perry White is very genuine, and he also throws some references back into the original Superman kinds of things, and he adds some lightness to the movie, even though his character is very serious about everything that he's doing.
Nobody cares about Clark Kent taking on the Batman.
We get the inside joke on what's going on with
There's
him.
like part of the Easter eggs on that. But when we're talking about Superman and the days of Christopher Reeve and the wonderful portrayal of Superman, I think those bright, shiny days sadly are gone. I metaphorically weep for that optimism, but kind of like in the song American Pie by Don McLean, it just leaves me with that same feeling of regret and kind of like for innocence lost, And it's kind of like as Heath Ledger's Joker told Batman in The Dark Knight, "Oh no, you've changed things." And The Dark Knight really was one of those movies that changed how DC does their movies. And even Wonder Woman's dark and gritty. There's not a bit of color in her outfit.
What outfit?
Yeah.
Well, and
in her rags.
One thing that didn't change for Man of Steel is clearly Superman is no friend of architects, bricklayers, steel workers.
Insurance companies do not like him.
I don't know why he doesn't like tall buildings. I mean, he's supposed to be able to leap over them, but he just keeps going through them.
Well, he's learning.
Is that it? He hasn't reached the over.
Yeah, he could fly over them, but
also, I have some questions. Even though there are several cameos by like scientists and news reporters, real world news reporters. There's even a real U.S. senator who's in the film, not portraying himself. He's portraying another U.S. senator. But I forgot what my point was. But the realism, even though with those real scientists in there, I just have a question that I need to tweet out to them and get an answer.
What's that?
The supersonic boom. If you're standing next to Superman and he all of a sudden takes off and there's a sonic boom, pretty sure that would hurt your ears or something, blow you away. I mean, I don't think you can stand next to a sonic boom and not like at least step back for a second.
Like you said, man,
especially
step back a little
if
bit
you're
more.
Wearing really tall stiletto heels. I'm just saying.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know, but we have, like we talked about Lex Luthor, he is just totally diabolical in this film, and you can be rest assured that he has no love for anybody who's doing good in this film.
He has no love for anybody. I mean, but I like a villain like this villain.
Yes, he was deliciously good as a villain.
I loved it.
And it's like Lois Lane in this movie, the whole story, it was more emotional. And I kind of felt like every decision that was made in this movie by Lois, by Clark, by Bruce, by Jesse Eisenberg's Luthor were life and death decisions, and we talked about the tender moments between Lois and Clark. They had equal worth to me also, but there's just, like I keep saying, there's so many Easter eggs and things I really want to talk about. And
you can't.
And I can't. There's...
Well, I mean, I will say, I enjoyed the film. I think it's a good film. But I think there are a couple places where they could have reined it back just a little. And I know you'll disagree. I always tend to think that the battle scenes are a bit too long. And that's the case here. There's one particular fight that I'm like, okay, let's end this already.
It was pretty badass, though. So,
there were still buildings standing, so they couldn't end it.
Well, what's very interesting, and Zack Snyder took this into account when making Dawn of Justice. You had Avengers out and all the Avengers movies, and they did their best to watch out for people in collateral damage. Man of Steel, it just seemed like wanting violence, and they were knocking buildings over.
Just destruction everywhere.
You know, and
no one cares.
You know, now they address that. It's a big part of this film, and I like that they did incorporate that. It's almost like they listened to some of the critics, some of the fans, and said, you know, Superman. Well, Christopher and a good friend of ours, he pointed out that Christopher Reeve's Superman looked out for every single person and tried to save every single person.
Right.
But I feel like the stakes are even higher in this film.
Yeah, there
than
are,
they were
and you see.
in Superman
you see
2,
traces of of that in this Superman, but
Right.
the world doesn't allow him to be Chris Reeve. You know, and
It doesn't.
The world of this Superman doesn't allow that.
You know, that's one of the things that Superman Clark Kent has to really struggle with is being this savior to mankind, and he's got to figure he doesn't want to be a savior. He just wants to help people, like they say in the movie. He's just a guy trying to do the right thing, and you know, it's got to be difficult if you're in that situation. You have that unlimited power, and yet you're trying to balance that versus people's expectations.
Well, and at the end of the day, no matter how superior, you can't do everything.
Right.
You know, and so how do you choose and all of that, you know. And so the thing is, though, the critics are not agreeing with a lot of what the fans are saying. And, you know, Scott Mendelson at Forbes called the film a glorious mess. He doesn't like it. He does like the cinematography, but he tore it apart, and he's not the only. I mean, they're tearing it apart all over the place with the critics. It had like 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. So what do you think about...
But the box office on that is proving it otherwise, and you know, it did 170 million this weekend opening up, and it's did like 424 I almost said billion million box office worldwide, so I think it's doing pretty well.
Well, I mean, I think that the critics, I feel like they're almost being intentionally hypercritical, like they want to tear it apart. They don't know what to do with these superhero movies anymore.
And I'd have to say that I think that the critics are wrong. I think that the fans are really the only ones who matter. Those are the people that spent their hard-earned dollars to go see it.
Yeah, and everyone that we know and everyone that we've talked to that's seen it really enjoyed it. Now everyone has these little quibbles. There are these little points, and everyone's going to see it differently. But in total, really enjoyed it.
Exactly.
Thought it was definitely worthwhile. There was no real disappointment about anything.
And I believe the box office is just proof enough. The fans have spoken. Justice will be served. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.